Sorry.
All right, that's not a problem. So do you think we lost that? Do you want me to say that again, or?
You can just, if you want to, just recap it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, Star Wars and Tron at the end of the 70s and the early 80s really helped to start integrating CGI effects into sci-fi movies, but Jurassic Park in the early 90s was that the moment where CGI really arrived.
And do you think that there's like a certain balance between like using like CGI as opposed to different like other effects that are more like organic, like how Jurassic Park did it, where it wasn't all completely
Right.
What do you think would be a good balance, just in general cases?
I think that it's okay if I move. I'm still firm. Personally, I am more a fan of three-dimensional concrete effects, like 2001. For me, is sort of the special effects masterpiece, whereas digital effects, I find that they have a certain aesthetic looseness. Yeah, it's inorganic, exactly. Jurassic Park does a pretty good job, though. I think that more recent films, like the recent Star Wars movies, Harry Potter movies, even most of the Lord of the Rings movies, for me, were a little too heavy on the CGI.
And do you think that depending on the amount of CGI can like affect the acting in some sort of way? Like, do you think that it kind of bounced off by having some characters not actually being there?
Sure.
At the,
It's tough to say. The first time I think I ever recognized this or realized it was when Star Wars Episode 1 came out and Jar Jar Binks was a character. That was the first time I'd really noted, like I had seen something where I think there was a completely CGI character. But at the same time, I really thought the movie was terrible, so it might have just been bad acting and a weird combination of CGI and live action. But I do think... And I think that can be a problem with green screen in general sometimes, is that there is, even if it's not acting, I feel like the spectator has a perceptual and in some way a cognitive disconnect between the space and the living form.
And there's like less interaction with like the background
and
stuff. So. And would you say that like the cost for like CGI is more convenient than using like certain actual elements, like using a background instead of creating things, you know what I'm saying? Like
sure, yeah. I think the costs are much lower. It's definitely an economic move that has prompted the CGI revolution or whatever people call it. And I also think there's a myth or an illusion that CGI and digital technology doesn't produce the same amount of material waste, because you don't have these things sitting around. But it really just produces a different type of waste. The waste seems more compact, and people think there's no trail because, it's not using reels of film and these big clunky things, and you can record over tapes and whatever. But in the long run, I think it'll be interesting how that is actually assessed, for sure.
Yeah, and like another thing though, I couldn't find too much information on like how the job market itself has like switched. Like, have more people been like hired because of CGI? Because I've seen like the special effects department for like the new like Avengers films and such. Like, it fills up the whole screen with just names. So would it be like a positive to say that like it hires more people in the long run as opposed to just using old kind of methods of like special effects? Or
it has probably produced jobs to a large degree, especially because now, every film is, no matter what, a live action romantic comedy with no fantasy elements whatsoever, is going to be edited. Its post-production will be done digitally. And so you have a digital team that's going to be polishing up the image, that's going to be polishing up the editing, stuff like that. So you just have these new jobs. I mean, those are new, crew member positions that didn't exist before.
So it's not really much the computer generated like things in general. It's just the new sense of how things are done in post production.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that it's not just special effects
Yeah.
teams. It's that, every film is a special effects film now, because they're all going to be...
Like touching up the film.
Exactly. But that has added jobs for sure.
And would you say that, like, kind of like how Transformers uses, like, a ton of just, like, CGI just all over the place, for, like, independent filmmakers, would you say that there's kind of, like, you know what I'm saying, like, you can only do so much as an independent filmmaker, so is there, like, a lack of it? Like, is it more of, like, a luxury to use certain things, or...?
Yes and no, because I think that, as you touched on before, it's from an economics standpoint, it can actually benefit independent filmmakers who cannot afford to, get cars and blow them up, but can afford the minimal digital software it takes to animate that happening. So, yes and no. I think there are some smaller, if you look at a film like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it was a pretty small, low-budget, not really indie film, because indie film today means like $20 million budget. But it had really, really extensive digital effects used. It just depends, I think, on the sensibility of the filmmaker and how innovative and dedicated they want to be to that type of experimentation. I think most mainstream filmmakers, or films like Transformers, aren't really innovative in their use of special effects.
So would you say that is there like a learning curve to it, like, in a sense, like, does it take a lot of skill to, like, create these, like, really, like, advanced kind of worlds to build on, like...
Definitely.
It would just be really hard for, like, people with, like, limited, like, I don't know, just people, you know what I'm saying, like, they wouldn't have the budget to hire people to create.
Sure, it takes a lot. For example, doing something like Transformers or Avatar, the amount of digital processing that's done to create the effects takes up so many servers and so much electricity and so much storage that's a huge budget item, line item. At the same time, something like Transformers, which is going to have to require a lot of money for really polished CGI effects, also doesn't really do much to further the use of effects as an art. It basically is just making an action film and replacing Sylvester Stallone with Megatron or a Decepticon. I'm trying to remember names of Transformers, but I haven't seen the movies, so I haven't really...
Yeah, because that's one of the things that people don't like about, like, just, like, heavy CGI use, is that, like, it takes away from the film by just adding visuals and, like, not as much focusing on the story, but just the show, kind of.
Yeah, well, the focusing on spectacle at the cost of narrative has been a Hollywood calling card for a century. So that's not something that's super new. And if you think about, like, the profits those films make, then clearly somebody likes it, right?
Yeah.
I think that as a critic or scholar or analyzing these films, there's plenty to be unhappy with in terms of what they're really offering, but...
So you'd say that, like, overall, the addition of just using all the, like, computers and stuff like that, it's just added a whole new, like, level of what films are now, and it's just like a kind of how we went from silent film. It's just like a new thing to move on to, right?
It is the next technological step. And there's some spectacle, blockbuster spectacle has always been basically just a stage for Hollywood to show off new technology, and that's what it is. That's what something like Transformers is now. It's a stage for Hollywood to show off the most up-to-date, latest innovations in CGI.
Yeah, another thing I was thinking about once was that one of the, like, people say that the CGI sometimes looks fake or something like that, but if you would think about it now that we have, like, really high quality cameras, I don't think that puppets would look as realistic anymore now, just because of, so we kind of just have to keep going with the technology in a sense, so.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I think about this sometimes when I watch, like, television shows in high def. Some of them, especially ones that I did not originally see in high def, like syndicated shows, Seinfeld, stuff like that. and I see them in high def, and it's like, this looks awful. You know, it looks
Yeah.
really weird, because not only the other components of the technical aesthetic weren't
Designed for that level.
designed for that, exactly. And so now it's just, yeah, it is, and it's interesting. It's interesting, sort of. I hadn't really thought about that point, but it's true that maybe the definition and the technology of the camera itself is going to maybe threaten that organic 3-dimensional presence of tangible special effects.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's just about everything.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. That was fun.